Today, we're going to set up a data set in SPSS. And when you first open SPSS, here's what you'll see. If you have data sets already created, you can find them here or you can go search for them. If you want to create a brand new data set, you can either click New Data Set or you can just dismiss this opening window. When you open SPSS, what you see here should be very familiar. You have two tabs down at the bottom, and here where we start in Data View. This is a standard database interface. This is where you're going to actually input all of your data. What is different about SPSS than many other types of databases is that you can't actually tell the computer anything about your data from this view. You can only input it. Down here in the second tab, we have Variable View, and here's where we're actually going to set up our data set. So for the purpose of setting up our data set, I hope you've all filled out the time orientation questionnaire, and if not, you will soon. So I'm going to actually set up this data set to input time orientation information. So a quirk about SPSS that you need to know about first. Here's where we're going to name our variables, everything that we're going to put in, all of our items. Regardless of what we want it to say up here, we can't input anything that has a space to it. So for example, if I wanted to name this time orientation 1, I'm going to get an error. So what I like to do instead is to give it an abbreviated title, TO1. Over here, this column allows us to type in whatever we want. So here I can actually call it time orientation 1 if I would like. So looking at our file, we have 16 different time orientation items that we're going to input into this data set. So I'm going to create a space for each of those here. You'll notice that as I've gone, some things have automatically filled themselves out. This column here, type, allows us to select the type of data we have. For example, if we're looking at currencies, if this is a string, which means actual words rather than numbers, if this is data that has a comma in it, or numeric data is what we actually want. The width sets the width of the columns over here in our data view. The decimals simply tells the computer how many decimals to show. Values is where you can actually indicate that a number means something besides number, and we'll talk about that more in just a second. Missing, just how to deal with your missing data. Columns, alignment, generally what you think. This is data that we're inputting. Right here, this is the most important thing for you to pay attention to right now. Here we have measure. SPSS is only as smart as the user, so it needs you to tell it what sort of data you're inputting for each item. Now, here's another little quirk about SPSS. It calls interval and ratio data scale. Nominal and ordinal are just exactly what you remember from your stats class, but anything that is interval or ratio data, you've got to call scale for SPSS. So of course this is just straightforward numeric 1 to 5 data, so all of this is scale data. All right. So now we've input our 16 time orientation items. So we need to put in the rest of our data, this demographic information down low. So for age is simply age. It's a number. So we don't have to do anything special for it besides tell SPSS that yes, this is indeed scale type data. Now we get into more interesting data types. So for class, we have freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, other, and non-applicable. SPSS, while you can input string data, doesn't know what to do with words. So anytime you have categories, you need to input them as numbers for SPSS to be able to do any sort of data manipulations with that item. So here you see in our file that I've labeled freshmen as 1, sophomores as 2, juniors 3, senior 4, other 5, and non-applicable 6. And because of the way SPS is set up, it's easiest, the rule of thumb is that when you are looking at your questionnaire, whatever your data source is, you label numerically left to right. That's the easiest way to make sure everybody is on the same page when you're actually transcribing a data set into SPSS. This is where the values column is going to come in. So clicking on values, I'm going to say the number 1 is actually equal to freshman and hit enter. The number 2 is equal to sophomores. And instead of hitting enter, I can also hit add. Okay. Now we need to decide what type of data this is. Well, non-applicable, there's a little bit of a wrench into our logic here, right? Because freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, other, well, we know that's actually ordinal data because it's categorical but with a ranking. So what does non-applicable mean? That could mean someone who's never been to school, or it could mean someone who's already graduated. Because we know that the sample in our data set is limited to people who have attended college or are already attending college, we know that everybody has to have had more education than is listed here to get to non-applicable. I'm the only one who's going to be able to fall into this category. So for our sample, this is actually going to be ordinal data. Last down here we have sex. Again, SPSS doesn't know what to do with the words male or female, so we need to left or right label them 1 and 2. And I'm going to go to values, and add my values in. Now, this is categorical data. It's categorical data without a ranking, so I know this is going to be nominal data. So now my data set is all set up. What does it look like over here? Well, now I see all of my categories up at the top of the string, and I'm able to input my data. So I'm going to pull directly off of my questionnaire here. Note that all participants go in the rows. So I'm going to be my first participant. My TO1 score is 5, TO2 is 5, TO3 is 1. And I'm just going to fill it in directly from the questionnaire from here on. Okay, now my age. Again, age is numeric, so I can just fill in the blank. My class, I'm non-applicable, so according to the way we've coded our questionnaire, I'm a 6. And my sex, according to the way we coded, is a 2 for female. If I had your questionnaire, then I would start off right here in participant 2 and put your answer to TO1, then your answer to TO2, and your answer to TO3. So for your task this week, I want you to set up this data set on your own. Give it some practice and let me know if you have any issues.